Let's go over an example of a cognitive conceptualization. If you haven't learned about this diagram before, it may look complicated, but it's pretty simple if you break it down. Let's start at the bottom. It has 3 examples of the cognitive model. So when you complete a CCD on a client, choose 3 situations that have different kinds of themes, unless the client is just coming in with one issue. We'll use Ken from earlier as the client. Let's talk about the first situation in Ken's CCD. It's when Ken was driving to work. So he had the automatic thought, what's my boss going to think about my report? And then his reactions were feeling anxious, and he began to engage in worry about his boss's reactions to the report. His heart started racing, and then he also felt tense. The next situation was when Ken was presenting at a meeting. He had a self-critical thought, I'm such an idiot, I don't know what I'm doing. This led him to feel anxious and angry at himself. His heart started racing again, he felt pretty hot, and his behavior was to focus on how anxious he felt because he thought he needed to control his anxiety. He also continued to mentally criticize himself throughout the performance. The last situation on Ken's cognitive conceptualization diagram was when he was at home with his family. So he noticed he felt depressed, and then he thought, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? He then felt even more depressed and experienced low energy. His behavior was to ruminate over and over about why he was feeling so depressed, and he tried to distract himself from that distressing emotion of depression. Now that we have the bottom of the diagram, let's go to the top, starting with the relevant history. Relevant history includes really any life event or circumstances that can influence the client's beliefs. So these can include things like developmental history, family history, social, medical, and educational histories. Ken grew up with an academically high-achieving older brother, and then his parents often compared Ken to his brother. His mother would also worry aloud, and she frequently told him that he always needed to prepare for the worst. His father didn't express much emotion, and when Ken was distressed, his father would also tell him, you shouldn't feel so upset. Clients' negative interpretations of these relevant life events or circumstances then become reflected in something called their core beliefs. These beliefs are overgeneralized, so they apply to a lot of different situations, and they're the client's most central beliefs about themselves, so much so that they seem like these fixed absolute truths about yourself. You can think of them as I am statements like, I am blank. So Ken developed the core belief, I am stupid, I am weak, and I am vulnerable to negative emotion. Let's skip down to coping strategies. You can think of these unhelpful patterns of behavior as strategies we use to cope with these core beliefs. These can be either observable, such as avoiding an anxiety-provoking situation, or they can be unobservable, like trying not to think about something. Ken learned to cope with his core belief of being stupid in several ways. He worried endlessly about his performance before and after situations in which he believed he either would or had been evaluated negatively. He also criticized himself excessively for less than perfect performances, and he compared himself to people he thought were smarter than he was. He coped with his core belief, I am weak, by focusing excessively on his anxiety and trying to control it. He also ruminated about why he felt so upset, and he frequently tried to distract himself from his negative emotions by doing things like watching excessive amounts of TV. Now we'll go over intermediate beliefs. One type of intermediate belief connects core beliefs to the coping strategy and is called a conditional assumption. The general form of this belief is, if I use the coping strategy, I'll be okay. And if I don't use this coping strategy, my core belief will come true. Here are 2 of Ken's conditional assumptions. If I worry about my performance, I'll be okay. If I don't, I won't perform well, which will prove I'm stupid. And if I focus on my anxiety, I'll be okay. If I don't, it'll spiral out of control, which will prove I'm weak and vulnerable. Intermediate beliefs also include beliefs about other people, the world, and sometimes the future. Ken's intermediate belief about other people was, if other people evaluate me, they're going to be judgmental. Another kind of intermediate belief is phrased as a rule. So here are a few of Ken's rules. I should always do my absolute best when someone could evaluate me. I should never show negative emotion, and I should always be happy. A third kind of intermediate belief is phrased as an attitude. So an attitude could be, it's terrible to be evaluated negatively. It's a weakness to show negative emotion. You can see how Ken's history led him to develop these maladaptive core and intermediate beliefs. He then learned to cope with these beliefs through different strategies, but these coping strategies end up just perpetuating his beliefs. You'll find a copy of Ken's full cognitive conceptualization diagram in the course library.